All right, Terry. Thanks for coming on the show.
Well, man, thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Glad it worked out.
I know you've got a big conference coming up in Nashville. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a couple weeks. So I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Man, you and I were just talking, like I think unfortunately our American culture has led us to busy being kind of a way of life.
Mm,
And, I like to I tend to work best in sprints. And so we were talking about travel and, I try to most of the time we don't my wife and I we've you were just talking about becoming an empty nester. We've never been full nesters. We have two dogs. So, we kind of that allows us to live kind of a different life,
mm.
and it's kind of made sense because my background, I grew up in a broken home, and kind of through that being part of my story of the brokenness, as I kind of had a decision, and as I got older, it kept getting more broke.
Mm.
Um, definitely had kind of a father that was not there. In fact, I just learned that my earthly father passed away, and didn't know, I had not talked to him in years,
Wow.
um, which is a huge part of my story.
Mm,
And luckily, early on, as my parents got divorced, like literally that was back in like when parenting plans really weren't a thing like they are now with divorces. And now you're really the court really required kids to get counseling. And
mm.
I had counseling right away, mainly just because I was rebelling in school. And so luckily I was deep into that, and that was a season where we got really plugged into a local church. And um I was able to kind of deal with that kind of all of the holes and gaps that left in my life. And there was luckily some men that rose up in that season.
Mm.
And so a lot of people ask, hey, have you mourned the loss of your dad? And I'm like, well, man, he died a long time ago. To me, was absent. um
Mm.
and so a lot of people, I share this story in my book, Making Elephants Fly. And a lot of people, in fact, my aunt called me and she's like, I haven't read your book. And I'm like, I kind of didn't send it to you because I don't think you want to read it. um and because it's got a lot of my story in it, because I think that's what sometimes sometimes the book is just as therapeutic for the author as it is for the reader.
Mm.
um and so that definitely shaped who I was. And it gave me a passion for kids from broken homes. So I became a youth pastor, started traveling the country, and then kind of realized that the North American church really didn't put, kind of kids that weren't part of their country club as a priority.
Mm.
So I began to speak in public school assemblies, and that really changed my life. And going into a lot of inner city schools, and we did them very non traditionally. We kind of threw a party. I brought a DJ and a hip hop artist and a rock band, and we talked about people who had changed, people who made history, and people who were going to create the future.
Mm.
And I always shared kind of part of my story of coming from a broken home, and how that was kind of part of it. And I would always tell the story of my mom was married and divorced four times by the time I was 18.
Mm.
And that was always the moment where the seventh graders in the third row were like, dude, I don't know about this chunky Caucasian on stage. I don't know if he has any. And there would always be kind of a chorus of just seventh and eighth graders going, damn, like you could just hear them go,
Yeah.
wow,
Yeah.
you're more jacked up than we are, dude. And like, then you can literally see them leaning in because they
Mm.
found, themselves in my story.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the most powerful things about our story that many of us are afraid to share. It's other people find themselves in our story. They find themselves in our heart. When
Mm.
I did share my story online, that, hey, hey, I'm just sharing with you that my father passed away 8 weeks ago, and I just found out about it. Um, and there were some people who just didn't understand it, but for the most part, there were people who were like, "Wow, man, I have that similar story, and nobody got it either." And I think I think our story is such a powerful tool that we have for others to find healing and hope. And we get a major decision in our life that we either get to let the things that happen to us or happen for us,
Mm.
and use it as a foundation that we can build. Obviously, you can't build yourself on brokenness, but that brokenness can be rebuilt, and it can be what allows us to um, have conversations that other people are able to listen, because they know that when they're speaking with us, they know that we have kind of stepped in what they're stepping in, if you will.
Right, right. That's that's so huge. So you've had the chance to really encourage young people in church settings, in public school settings. Can you tell me a little bit, Terry, about making elephants fly? Because I see a flying elephant behind you.
Yes,
Uh,
Dumbo. Yeah, Making Elephants Fly is the name of my podcast, and it's also the name of my book, Making Elephants Fly. And you know, we've all heard. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, kind of a very creative, innovative city where everyone kind of moves here with a big dream, much like New York or LA or cities like that.
mm,
And people come here with like seeking opportunity and seeking open doors and seeking like-minded people. And Nashville is very much there. And everywhere I went, I kind of noticed um this elephant in the room, that I'd go to like Starbucks and get a cup of coffee. And I've been traveling, almost full time since I was 17,
mm,
speaking. And so everywhere I went, man, I would, you just learn to talk to people, because I love to learn people's stories. And so everywhere I'd go, I'd be like, all right, man, tell me the real story. Like, I know you didn't move to Nashville to make, you know, iced macchiatos for people. Like, what brought you to Nashville? It's always I was a songwriter. And I just began to kind of have this vision of like, man, the elephant in the room in every place I go in this city is somebody that has a big dream that it's not, you know, that they're not doing anything about. So literally one of the first chapters of the book is called Elephants Make Bad Pets. And I saw kind of this picture in my head. I had one of my friends draw it of an elephant trying to sit on your lap while you watch TV. We've all had lap dogs that were a little oversized. Um, and so obviously, if you can't tell if you're watching this on video, but you're probably just listening to the audio of this podcast, I'm a huge Walt Disney fan, and that's the Dumbos that you see in the background. And I thought, man, Walt Disney was somebody that had this audacious belief in something, that if he believed that an elephant could fly in a movie, that there was some way to make him fly in a theme park. And Walt Disney realized that the way that happened was through collaboration, through partnering with other people who were smarter than you were to achieve a task that was bigger than you were.
mm.
And so that's really the big idea. It kind of started with a conversation from another kind of someone who was kind of doing similar work to that I am, and we talked about you know that there's a famous quote from Walt Disney, um that if you can dream it, you can do it,
Mm.
which really isn't what Walt Disney said. He said if you can visualize it, if you can dream it, there is some way to do it, meaning that there's a way to do it if you're willing to put in the work.
Mm.
And that's how it is for a lot of us with our big visions, that if we have the audacity to believe. I just watched um, the movie with Matt Damon and Ben Affleck, Air,
Oh
about
yeah, I
Nike
just saw it
getting
last
Michael
week.
Jordan.
Yeah.
There's a great quote in that movie, from Chris Tucker, who plays one of the executives at Apple. And I'm pulling up the exact quote because if I'm going to use a quote, I don't like to butcher it. But he said that, what exactly did he say? He basically just said, that you have to believe first, that you have to be the one that believes before anybody else believes.
Mm.
And um and so, there's power in that.
Yeah. The you you've collected stories. You've connected with lots of people, dreamers, people who had big dreams that were maybe not taking action on them. How um well, I have a few questions, Terry. One, or like, what are like your big dreams lately? But before that, have you had any broken dreams? And how have you kind of like worked through those?
Well, that's a great question. Dude, I think that life is just a series of managing expectations and disappointments. And, I've never met anybody that released a book that said, "Man, that went so much better than I thought it would have."
Mm,
And we always have giant expectations that don't always work out. And I think it's super important to not let the things that don't happen and don't quite work out, realizing that, no might just be not yet. Um it might be different, and it might look different than you expected, or it might come later.
mm,
And a lot of the things that I've everything is going to take incredibly longer than you thought it would.
mm,
And I'm seeing results from seeds I planted 6, 8, 9, 12 years ago. Relationships, opportunities. And we live in a culture of speed, and a
yeah.
culture of where everybody kind of, you know, everybody's selling an ad, for a coaching program or a course that's gonna, hey man, if you do this in just 6 minutes, your life will change. And that's just not, that's not reality.
Yeah, whether it's a business or a book or speaking, you have to hone your craft for years.
Yeah. I mean, the
You've been doing it
10,000
for
hours.
years.
I mean, my mom and I were talking about, the 10,000 hours. And she's like, man, you put in 10,000 hours talking to your stuffed animals as a kid. Because that's literally kind of how I learned to speak.
Mm,
I loved Billy Graham, and I loved Tony Robbins, because back in the 80s and 90s, Tony Robbins was on TV selling VHS and cassette tapes. It seemed like 24 hours a day. And Billy Graham, it felt like, had a crusade every other weekend. Um, and oddly enough, the thing about his life that he regretted as the most was being gone, as much
mm,
as he was. Um,
mm,
but yeah, man, I think the hours that you put in to do things, whether it's coaching or speaking, and I don't know anybody that's great at anything that
mm,
isn't always trying to get better, that
yeah.
isn't always trying to surround them with things and people and relationships and coaches and knowledge and books, and always looking at going. I mean, my event in Nashville is a couple weeks away. So if someone's listening to this, it's probably too late for them to come unless they're an action taker or live close to Nashville. Good news, we do another event in November. Um, and so they can join us there, the thing Orlando. But I'm already looking at things that haven't even happened that I know are sort of like mistakes we made in this journey. And I'm evaluating, like, what did we fix? What did we mess up along the way?
You're constantly evaluating and improving.
Yeah, like we're looking at, like, okay, well, this didn't quite work out like we thought it would. What one of the things we did an event during 2020 called The Thing at Home, which was supposed to be the weekend of our big event. We had the most registrations for a conference we've ever had. And obviously the pandemic came along, and
Mm,
crapped on our parade, if you will. And
mm,
um, one of the one of our people, and a lot of people have said it along the way, but Aurora Gregory said, "What does this make possible?" And so, what is this not working out quite like we wanted it to make possible? What is it? What are we allowed to do? What are we not? What is it? What doors does this experience open us up to? What can we, and I think that stupid episode of, Friends where they pivoted the couch, and we've heard that word so many times. But I think so much of success is on our ability to be flexible and our ability, the thing that most entrepreneurs and most leaders have that aren't working at mega organizations or mega churches, they have the ability to be fast and quick. And, if you're working with a mega organization, like Disney or Apple or a company like that, it's really hard to move fast. But most of us have the ability to make a quick decision. We don't have to call 3,000 people to have a meeting about it. We just do it. And I think adapting and changing and shifting is constantly where success is found.
yeah. The 10, 20 years ago, Terry, what did you think you were going to be doing right now?
Man, I thought I would be Greg Laurie.
Ah, we just watched Jesus Revolution.
I thought I would be Greg Laurie.
So
I thought
ministry
I would be
was was was
speaker,
was the goal.
evangelist. Um, I hoped I would have had a better hairline than he did. Um,
That worked out.
but yeah, I mean, man, life very rarely takes you down the path that you thought you would have gone down. Um,
Hmm.
it's
I
just not how it works.
I grew up dreaming and wanting to be a surgeon, being a
Okay.
doctor, and that was the dream. And it was devastating when I um didn't get into medical school. Applied 2, 3 times. Had to change plans. But even when I went to grad school, became a counselor, I still, in the back of my mind, didn't give up on going back to medical school until I was like 40. I finally let go of that, and
Wow.
fully embrace like being a counselor now. But I I want to be a speaker. I want to write and do podcasting better. So I have lots of dreams, but like the execution is challenging. When I love lots of different things, it's hard to focus.
Well, dude, I'm ADD, and so like my mind, I've I guess I was kind of the first generation where they started to try to treat that.
Mm,
I was one of the Ritalin kids. And what I've learned is like, it's my secret sauce. It's my ability to bounce between many things and to be happy. I would be miserable, dude, if I just did one thing.
right.
I really would. I would probably need to be medicated for depression. Um, because I'd be operating outside of how God designed me. And I think a lot of us look at the things that the world and society and culture try to make a shortcoming when they're really not. They're really our superpowers. And my ability to think and do and um, experience differently, and and a lot of people is like, it's bad business, and you can't, this human mind can't, you know. I'm kind of like Han Solo, man. Don't never tell me the odds. Um, that's just the reality for somebody else, but I don't think that's the reality for me.
I love that. Yeah,
Uh,
you haven't let people limit you. Just find a way to make it work
I've
for you.
never been good at staying inside a box.
Hmm.
Um, and if that was the case, I would have listened to my second grade teacher who told me I'd never be able to succeed, and um my math teacher in seventh grade had told me I was a big disappointment.
Hmm.
Um, so
That,
yeah, man, I think it's really, really, I think it's really interesting that when I look at the people around me who I'm going, man, they are just killing it. All of them, all of them have leveraged their uniqueness and what somebody would have probably called it a weakness, and they figured out a way to make it a strength.
yeah,
And
yeah. Those are some of my favorite stories. That's one of my favorite things to see
yeah,
in
now
life.
most of us aren't going to see those things because we don't know what we're looking at because we're only looking at the highlight reels of their life,
Mm,
and literally there's a product called Reels on Instagram, right? Like we're just seeing 1 minute of out of someone's, we lose a lot of context when we don't understand
mm.
all of the rough edges that have been edited out. And
There's a
the
story behind that.
I mean, man, even Zoom,
Mm.
Zoom is making you and I look better than we actually do. A lot of people love using Zoom, and I'm like, I hate Zoom because it never seems to work. And about half the time I use it after an hour, like the audio just stops working. And so, warning, if it happens, I know the system and I'll be back in 3 minutes. But yeah, it's you can either let those things be, it's throughout history, it's throughout scripture. I mean, Michael Jordan. I mean, what that movie did for me was an interesting perspective shift because Nike was Nike was the smallest of the shoe companies. They had 17% product share.
Right. That was a cool statistic that they showed
Yeah.
early. Yeah.
Michael Jordan got drafted third.
Right. Well, here in Portland, that's a sore subject because we drafted Sam Bowie.
Who?
Sam Sam Bowie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? I had to Google him because I wrote a blog post about it last night.
Oh
And I
man.
was like, who the heck
Yes.
is Sam Bowie?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the Trailblazers, dude, back in the day were a contender.
Oh, for sure. But
But
their last championship was 72.
that'd have been a different team, like if Mike was
51 years
in the
ago.
building.
Yes. Yes.
But what made Michael Jordan work in the end was the power of team. Was him and Steve Kerr and
Pippen.
Pippen and Rodman.
Hmm.
Um,
Horace Grant.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it was
All the
just
guys. Yeah.
he he brought greatness out of everybody in the building.
Couldn't do it by
And
himself.
huh?
He couldn't do it by himself. Even
No,
Michael Jordan. Yeah.
no. And I think we're starting to learn basketball is, professional basketball used to be one of my favorite sports to watch, but I hardly watch it anymore
Mm.
because it's mostly guys just trying to get highlight reels. Very rarely do we talk about a team. We talk about Steph Curry or LeBron, and if one more person says LeBron is the greatest of all time, right? Like Michael Jordan is the
uh,
greatest basketball
this,
player.
this is a painful subject for me, Terry. They just got uh, two fourth quarter comebacks from the Nuggets have put my Lakers on the ropes, and
Yeah, and they're not. Who knows?
yeah.
Who knows? We're
But you're
watching.
right.
Game 3 has just happened. It's not looking good for the Lakers.
It's not looking good.
And I think that's Kobe. Kobe was somebody who brought greatness out of everyone in the room. LeBron is the kind of leader that doesn't bring greatness out of other people.
Hmm.
He's great, and I think that's the one thing that's keeping him from truly being the greatest of all time.
Hmm.
And I think that there was something in those days where everybody kind of laid down a little bit of their own glory for the good of the team. That John Wooden quote that, we can accomplish great things if we're just no one wants to get the credit. And, the Bulls were the only team that hoisted the trophy. It wasn't just one person. There was sure a lot of attention on the guy that was flying through the air, but it was all about what the team could have accomplished. And I think that's one of the things that holds a lot of leaders back is the ability to have a team and to build the team and to surround yourself with people that are intimidating. Because I think a lot of times when you're great and really skilled at something, there's a temptation to not surround yourself with excellence, but surround yourself in a way that you stand out.
Mm. Well, that's unhealthy in business, but also in church cultures.
Oh yeah.
Um, how how did you make the shift, Terry, from that goal of ministry of being a speaker or evangelist in church context
It
to more
happened in
entrepreneur?
Texas. And normally we can, a lot of things in life, um, you can kind of look at an evolution. Um, but things shifted for me in Lufkin, Texas. I had just done school assemblies for a week. I had spoken in a sold out arena, pretty much as big as an arena they have in Lufkin, Texas. And we gave the invitation that night. About almost 600 kids came forward. Amazing. It was those early days of like, we did schools and then we did like an evangelistic rally. And it was those days of what felt like, what I watched Billy Graham do on TV. Like I felt like I was getting to do that.
Mm,
But I had the hard reality of like looking back at those 2 days. There was a 2-day gap in between that event and me going to Waco, Texas. And in those days, I realized that those guys in that city had very little plan to follow up with any of those people.
mm,
We're hearing amazing stories of these people declaring this great faith and these big decisions. And I remember this one student. I can still see his face. There were several of those students. I wrote about in my book. But one of the students was a Muslim background, and he literally moved out of his house because of his faith, because his parents denied him. And he literally took up his cross and followed Jesus,
yeah.
but almost alone because there wasn't a follow-up plan. And you know I began to think about the work that I was doing. I was basically creating spiritual orphans, and that hit me like a ton of bricks across the head because there was no plan
Mm,
for doing what the Great Commission really called people to do, which was make disciples. So from that, I go to Waco, Texas, stop at Whataburger because that's what you do when you're in Texas. You have a disappointing Texas burger, and that's not a third of as good as an In-N-Out burger. And thank goodness In-N-Out came to Texas to save them, and redeem their sad burgers. Hey, but the spicy ketchup, now that's great at Whataburger.
I bring it
And
home when I can.
and I literally found myself preaching to the choir that weekend. It was a youth choir retreat, and the juxtaposition of that really just was a lot for me to sit with. And God began to move my heart, and doors began to open for other things. And at the same time, we would have conversations with churches about continuing to do things to reach those kids that were far from God. And they didn't care. They were country club. They were country club organizations. Some of the biggest churches in America told us no. We had the social proof that what we were doing was working, but they just weren't interested in filling their pews full of lost kids from the inner city. And they weren't willing to put their money where their calling was. And that really just, I've always been somebody that I will stay and do something as long as I feel like I'm being of good and of use. and I began to feel like I wasn't of use. Now, also during this season, I was also in the music industry as kind of a side hustle. I was managing artists, and all those most of those artists that I was traveling with, we were kind of helping direct their career, and we were, you know, I rarely went anywhere where I didn't bring somebody with me, like a musician or a band or a comic or something, another element, right? Um, and so things just began to shift. A couple of years later, I helped somebody start, an online membership site. Realized I was really good at it. Realized that the bands and the brands were really similar. Um, and then oddly enough, the whole thing kind of came to an end. I was invited to this thing in Wheaton, Illinois, at the Billy Graham Center, at Wheaton College, and that was kind of the last like intentional thing I did to serve the church from a professional. That's not to say that I haven't preached at tons of churches since then, but that was the last thing I really sought after, and that was back in 2015.
When when that happened, did you have a crisis of maybe not faith, but like a crisis of identity? Because you had been doing that type of thing for so long, since you were 17, at least.
Yeah, dude, there was some of that, but also like, I think God's calling on my life was always to find people who were called and to help them get there. That was what I was really called to do.
Mm. Ooh,
You
say
know,
that again. Say that again. That's so
the
good.
calling on my life was to find people who had God's calling on their life and to help them get there.
Okay. Yeah.
That
That's I I I love that because that's I get you just put into words like one thing I love to do. Like that's
yeah, and I don't think I've
I
ever
love
said it
doing that.
like that.
Yeah.
Um, but I love.
Mm.
I know this, man. Life is short, and the sooner I can help people figure out why they're here,
Yes.
the better. I remember reading The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren, and if Rick Warren wrote nothing else except for the first sentence of that book, it would still be one of the greatest books ever written.
Hmm.
And the first sentence of that book is it's not about you. And, the word purpose gets thrown around so much. And, Rick was one of the early people to do it. But yeah, man, I think my purpose just became clear because it's funny, you know, I have, lead mastermind and coaching groups now. And all the time people like, sending me, the people who I know that are of faith, they're like, do these people know you're just pastoring them? Like, you're just shepherding them, you're just guiding them. And, I think everything we do in life is for seasons. It's to prepare us for what's next. And if I'm being really honest, looking back on that season, I kind of hid behind my faith rather than letting it be what opened the doors to follow what God really wanted for my life.
Mm. Explain that more. Hid behind your faith.
And I've spoken at a few like Christian podcasters conference, a Christian entrepreneurs conferences. This is me being real vulnerable, dude.
Yeah. Thank you.
I always kind of leave those things wanting to kind of take just a cold shower and like bleach myself
Mm.
because I always just leave feeling really, um, just disappointed. Because what's interesting about those rooms
Mm.
is they're normally full of people who have a big calling from a big God, but live small lives.
Mm.
And, it kind of goes back when you go, like you just mentioned watching Jesus Revolution, which was a fantastic film. but oddly, when you start going, I can't imagine you feel differently than me. The most of the time when you sit down to watch a movie that has the asterisk, this is a Christian movie, you're literally prepared for 90 minutes of the worst cinema of your life, right? Like, you're prepared for, like, this wouldn't even be on TBS, like, right?
I
And
I am definitely like I'm team Jesus Christian movie, so I like gather myself for sure.
you what?
I gather myself that I'm gonna like watch this because
Like, yeah,
I'm
I
gonna
feel
be
like
nice.
I'm, and and I've been some groups, a group of friends and I, we made a movie called As Dreamers Do about the life of Walt Disney with some faith based, taking some of Walt's faith and some of it, mostly just really focusing on his audacious belief in himself and his how he pulled himself up by the bootstraps when everybody else would have quit, um, which is a theme of scripture. And man, most of the time when you leave, you just you're like the first attribute you learn of in scripture of God is his creativity, but most of the time it's like, man, this is awful. And yeah, and man, I think that most of the time in our faith cultures of faith, we've created environments where people have to show up small. They have to show up and hide parts of themselves. They lack authenticity. And we've normalized that. We've normalized that you kind of, it started in the 40s and 50s in how people dressed when they went to church. You put on your Sunday best. And if you look throughout scripture, Jesus never met anybody in their Sunday best. He met them at their worst. That's all the gospels are, is Jesus people meeting people most of the time at the lowest point of their life.
Right.
True. I mean, and we've created a culture where the church is a place where people are kind of expected to clean up before they get there. I've mostly gotten fired from church jobs because I brought people to the ministry that we were doing that disrupted that.
Troublemaker.
And
You were a troublemaker. You were a troublemaker.
well,
You're making things hard.
we were staining the Jones Memorial carpet.
Mm. Mm.
Please, when I die, don't name the carpet in the Baptist sanctuary the Weaver Memorial carpet. But yeah, dude. I mean, I think and this is I love Jesus more in this season of my life than I ever have. But in communities of faith, I often find myself feeling more alone than I've ever felt and more out of place because there's a lack of authenticity. There's a almost like a foreign language being spoken. I spoke at a conference. It's funny because we're recording this during the National Religious Broadcasters. I spoke at a Christian podcasters conference, and it's just these are weird environments that somehow where you go to the building and it's like, wow, there's a 10-foot tall poster of whoever the Christian celebrity of the time is. It's a giant TD Jakes over there, on a banner. And so it's just a weird. I wish I had all the words to put around it to understand some of the feelings that I have in these places, but it just very much probably how Jesus felt when he turned over the tables and felt like, man, what happened to what the instructions were for what was to happen here,
Yeah. You're
what's actually happening.
you're talking more than just feeling out of place or feeling like a misfit. Like you're 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 talking about like things are not the way it should be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like I said, if I can't change the environment, I'm probably not going to be in it.
Mm, mm,
And I feel like, people, I get asked to consult at church Christian things from time to time.
mm.
And one of the questions I get asked is, what do you think the biggest problem facing the church, the North American church in 20, whatever, since 2023. And I still would go back to what I've been saying for the last 10 years is most of the talented people that I know that served in a local church are now working in the marketplace, and they're not serving the church from, the guy that was the youth pastor is now selling cars.
Right.
And it's not because he loves Jesus any less.
Right.
It's just because the culture didn't want people who were going to disrupt the comfort.
Mm.
So
Pray,
yeah, and it's
pray for my son, Terry.
uh
He pray for my son. He just moved last weekend to Southern Oregon to be a pastor in a small church. Yeah.
yeah, and it's very difficult, man,
Yeah.
and I think of guys that are trying to do ministry in places like that where it's like, man, these are secular environments. I think I've seen a lot of posts about the death of Tim Keller this week. And it's like, pastoring a church in New York City is a different bag than anywhere else in the world. And he did it authentically. And I think a lot of us of faith, people of faith, need to look in the mirror and say, what would happen if we just started showing up everywhere as authentically who we are? I'm in a group and somebody asked, do you consider your business a faith forward business? And I was like, well, I don't know. I can't find anywhere in the Bible where Jesus came to save my business. Right. And so, but he called me. So I'm going to go do that.
Right.
And I think we like bento boxes. We like our food, you know,
Mm.
in boxes and
Compartments.
little spaces,
Mm.
and I live in the South, man.
This goes there. This goes there. Yeah.
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 I live in the South, man. You go and you put your mashed potatoes and your collards and your fried chicken, and then you put gravy all over everything, and I think that's how we're meant to live. Life is messy. You can't partition parts of your life. And so, as a person of faith, is people ask all the time, is your conference a Christian conference? Well, no. But there's Christians at it. I have speakers that are pastors, ordained pastors, and I have ones that will never sit in a church again. They'll never go to church again, and probably believe things you disagree.
Mm.
But I remember Mike Yaconelli, who was kind of one of my heroes back in the day, who was the founder of Youth Specialties. Mike was always Mike. Mike was always kind of the patron saint of the youth pastor. He had a talk one time about getting fired for the glory of God. And obviously, as someone who's been fired as a youth pastor, I enjoy that talk.
You refer to that? Yeah.
I referred to that. But Mike, Mike has a great book called Messy Spirituality. I bought a case of them, but when the printer at a one of those discount bookstores, I was like, I'm gonna give as many of these books as I can away. And one of the first things we moved to Nashville in 2001 was you do weird things when you live in Nashville. An organization called Compassion International I was working with, speaking on their behalf a lot at the time. And they invited a bunch of us to Michael W. Smith's barn. And Mike Yaconelli led a retreat for us, and there was hundreds of us. I just saw Rachel Lampa last week at Lauren Daigle's release party, and we were talking about, I was like, girl, you were 17 and you rode in the back of my truck. And she's like, I'm not 17 anymore. I'm like, yeah, I'm much older. So, but I remember the weekend with Mike and just how messy he was. And he was this, kind of Northern California, kind of Miss Ragamuffin, if you will, and I remember going to those Youth Specialties is probably one of the events that kind of shapes who I am now still, and hanging out those early days with guys like Tony Campolo and Brennan Manning and not knowing how cool Brennan Manning was at the time, but just getting to talk to him about spirituality and faith and um, Rich Mullins. And man, I think I think a lot of times we make things really complicated. Like Avril Lavigne reminds us, why do you have to make things so complicated? And sometimes the beauty is in the simplicity of it. And you know, I long for simpler things. I long for, just authentic conversations. And I'll be honest, dude, as a person of faith, I feel like I'm having more impact than I've ever had, even back to that moment. And, those moments that I got to be a part of, many of them, where the band would play "Oh How He Loves" and hundreds of kids would respond to the gospel. I mean, those were powerful. Those will be moments that when I get to see Jesus face to face, we'll celebrate. But I don't think we'll celebrate any more than the life change of of Candace, who I coach, who works with girls who've been a victim of rape and abuse, and helping her raise up and quit her job, and get public funding for her nonprofit, and open up a center to reach out to them and provide counseling, and to provide literally some of their most basic needs when they go to the hospital. We help create these kits that um where they get a new clean clothes when they show up at the ER after being abused, and literally a teddy bear, and
Right.
and leaders who are stepping into their calling. And you know and I could go on and on and on about people I get to work with nowadays that are doing life-changing, you know they're doing work that really matters, and it's the work
Mm.
they're called to do.
Yeah.
And I've helped them get there a little quicker.
Terry, I want to talk to ask you about one specific person. And it's a little bit of a shift, but like
Okay.
with the time that we have left, I kind of maybe want to end with this because I want to learn from you. You mentioned before we hit record that your wife and you're together for 25 years this year. Um, I'm just curious about the lessons that you guys have learned uh, together through all the ups and downs. Like, how have you been good teammates? And
Dude, she has supported me
yeah.
and encouraged me. In fact, one of the people I'm working with right now is a single mother of five going through a divorce, after, some mental health things and some abuse things. And, you know, I can't even fathom the language of not having a supportive spouse. Even when things are we already look at things and know this isn't going to quite work out like we wanted it to.
Right.
She's already still encouraging me to keep going. And, and, you know, and that support has looked different over the years. Um, I mean, there's definitely have been seasons where it's literally been financial support, because I had the crazy job and she had the one that got us health insurance.
Hmm.
Right. And in
Yeah.
fact, that's still the case. Her job, and that's probably one of the only reasons she still keeps her job. Right.
Hmm.
Um, which if our government could figure something out, that'd be real nice.
Hmm.
Um,
You're comfortable on the stage in the spotlight. Your wife's personality, is she more behind the scenes or
yeah, I'm pushing her more and more out to be out front, because I think she's brilliant. I think she's one of the best. No one knows how to lead a group. She leads a team of about 600 people,
oh,
and is one of the most brilliant people I know at developing leaders,
mm,
at taking people that started with essentially a minimum wage job and turning them into leaders that have ambition and skills, and have the ability to lead others that they didn't have before, including starting with just the very idea of leading themselves well. And so, you know, if there's any lesson to learn, is I need to do a better job of pushing and supporting her. It's funny. We start the conference that I do with a kids book. And when Leslie and I were dating, back in 1998, um, we would go to like Walmart and she would grab a book off the shelf and she'd read me the kids book, right? And that's always kind of been like a joke, right? Like, so, now fast forward, we do a conference, we start every day with a kids book, because, one of the reasons I have one of my events is at Walt Disney World is because biblical principle, hello. Thinking like a child is often how we can find those things inside us that have been suppressed by society. And, I think, I mean, you can look in my office and know that I don't have a problem with that. But I think it's just super important to find those gifts. And, she's going to be speaking at this next event. She's fighting it a little bit, but, because, and I think a lot of us do that. We allow ourselves to settle for being behind the scenes when we really do have something to say.
Yeah.
If more people, I always use this example. The dude, if you had the cure to cancer and you didn't tell anybody about it, you'd be a real jerk. And you may not have the cure to cancer, but you might have the cure to help save someone's marriage. You might have the secret for somebody that's a single mother that's struggling to make their ends meet that would help their business work. You might have the ability to help somebody know how to do something that they couldn't figure out on their own, that's going to allow their family to thrive and their marriage not to fail, because they're not going to burn out at a job they hate and love.
Right. Yes.
And, I think we all have these unique gifts. And, it's funny, man, because you mentioned, we talk about the full circle. The number one question that 20-year-old Terry Weaver got from kids was, man, how do I know God's will for my life? And a lot of that, is similar to the work of how do I know what I'm supposed to do here on this earth, right? It's just a different way of saying it. And,
right.
Some of that is, man, you've got to just start messing around with things that you enjoy doing and things that make you happy. And, we miss the things that are our best and most, the things that we bring the most to the table, because we often have gotten so used to being told that, you should be seen, not heard, or it's somebody else's time to shine. And I think we've, and you see this, I see this work because I work with a lot of guys that were pastors or youth pastors, and are kind of getting into more of a business role in their life. They might have served as a worship pastor or a creative pastor, or the guy that, was kind of the ops guy at church. And now they're kind of shifting back into the business world. And, a lot of them did not serve leaders that allowed them to shine and allowed them and pushed them to, because that leader felt like the need to always be in the spotlight. And I think we've gotten the whole, you mentioned spotlight, dude. That's a thing we wrestle with, because the Kardashians don't have a problem being known. But most of us use, these words, man, I just want to be humble. And man, if you look up the word humble in a dictionary, I don't want to be humble. I don't want to be second. I don't want to be of ill advice and of not of worth, because I believe I was created in God's image, so I am of worth, and I believe I was given a task, and I'm going to do it. And I'm super grateful for Leslie and the support that she's provided to me. And one of the things that we've done, the pandemic was really hard on us because we're big experience is not thing. So this is the first year we're really getting kind of back into our travel swing. Because we do work really hard, I make sure I travel once a quarter. and take one really long trip throughout the year. So our long trip this year will be in September. We're going to Paris, Disneyland for a couple of days, and then a cruise to the British Isles to celebrate our 25th anniversary. Um, she's not been to London since she was a kid. I've never been, so we're making it a priority. We're spending way more money than we probably should, but the experience of it is super valuable to us. Versus, what will we buy that we would just get rid of and be a yard sale in a couple of months? And you know, I'm we're obviously Disney fans, so we're at Walt Disney World a couple times a year for fun and once for work. And I mean, end up at Disneyland fooling around too. And these are places that kind of reset us, and the beach does that, right? And it's funny because you know one of our things we would go to a Caribbean country, and then when it was freaking cold here in Nashville, and now we've started bringing my coaching clients with me and doing a mastermind. So it's like
Wow.
the work and fun kind of gets blurry, and so because of that, I've got to be even more intentional about that travel and that time we spend together.
I see.
And
Yeah.
and did our stupid phones, man, make that real hard because we're so used to being connected, and like there's always something going on or a notification or something that should have our attention. So
Right.
being present is getting harder and harder and harder.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. My wife and I, we really haven't traveled much, and we went on our first cruise for our 25th anniversary before the pandemic, and we're like, oh man, we really need to travel more, and then everything shut down. But uh, you've inspired me a few ways today, Terry. One, just a reminder, like to make time to travel, um, but the two, like not to play small. For maybe 25 years, 20, 25 years, I I told myself a limiting belief that the reason I became a counselor is because I'm not a good preacher. I went to seminary to for MDiv degree, and I said, I'm not much of a preacher, so I'm going to go the counseling route. But just recently, I realized I need to let go of that limitation. I actually do like to teach, and I do like to speak, and I want to be more creative and a better speaker. I want to give myself permission to work on it and eventually speak at conferences. Um,
well, dude, the way to fix that is just one of the things we do in the thing community. It's funny because we had a speaker this week kind of have a crisis hit, and rather than finding somebody else from outside the community, it's like, well, who in the community teaches this? They might not be there yet, but they need a kick in the rear. They'll never take the leap.
hmm,
So a good bit of at least half our speakers come from the back row
hmm, yeah, that's
because,
awesome.
and that's a problem in the church, right? Like we're not pushing people forward.
Hmm,
We're pushing people into, structural ladders where, you know, we've if you look at the model of the church in most denominations right now, it's essentially McDonald's. We franchise the church. We have campus pastors, and
hmm,
the really good guys speak. And I get it. Like there's some people that are, like there are people in the church that are, the Furdicks and the Craig Groeschels and the TD Jakes and the Tim Kellers. They're the rare ones that it's like, wow. But that doesn't mean that you don't have something to say and that you couldn't impact somebody. And I wouldn't be where I was at today if it wasn't for people who gave me at bats when I shouldn't even been swinging a bat.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I would encourage you and everyone to find somebody around them. It's funny. John Maxwell has been someone who I've always looked up to,
Mhm.
who's interestingly enough a person who mostly exists in the secular marketplace, but a person of faith. And if you look at scripture, man, there's everything you need in how Jesus worked with people and leadership. Jesus had the 12, he had the 3, and he had the 1. Um, Oddly enough, the one was the one that doubted the most outside of Judas. Peter was the one, and he was the one full of the most doubt and the most questions and the most. I mean, he embarrassed himself in the final hours of Jesus' life, denying his even existence, and 3 times. And I think we have underestimated just the value that you know giving people the opportunity to learn and grow. And I've been using this a lot lately, and I'm gonna even be more and more into leaning into the rest of the year. Is I'm saying yes to almost anything right now, just because I feel like that's the season I need to be in. I'm not only doing podcasts based on. I'm not looking at their listenership. I don't care. Don't tell me any of that. Let's have a great conversation, and if it helps 2 people, I've won. And that's you and one other person, right? And so I'm trying really hard to return the gift that I was given, and that's been opportunity. And I think all of us ought to look at the work we do and go, man, who can we put on this platform that we have, whether it's big or small, and begin to give someone a chance to believe that it might be possible for them too.
Yeah.
I'm writing a talk um, that I've kind of done before, but it's really about kind of I'm a Star Wars nerd, and I caught something in this last Obi-Wan series, and in the last, Rey. There's this thing that Jedi do. They bury that in Obi-Wan dug up his lightsaber out of the desert. Rey at the end of the last the what is it, the last Skywalker, whatever, the last Star Wars, episode 9, she buried hers in Luke's lightsaber. Like, why are these people burying their greatness? So I've been kind of on a, like, what can I glean out of the Star Wars universe to teach on? And the one thing that I'm kind of leaning on, and I'm tweaking into it. I'm in the depths of working this into a talk right now. Is out of that bury your greatness is the moment when Yoda trained Luke Skywalker on Dagobah, where they're having this moment of like mentor and mentee back and forth and back and forth, and the X-wing is buried in the swamp. And Luke gets so frustrated because he's like, man, Yoda, man, you just want impossible. Everything you're trying to get me to do can't be done. And Yoda, what I love about Yoda is he's like, he's a motivational speaker, right? And so he's got his like tweetable things that he says, do or do, all of those things, right? There is no, do, only try, and all of those things. And in that moment, when Luke's like, you just want impossible, there's this weird, awkward silence. And then you see Yoda standing there, with his little, weird hand, and raising the X-wing out of the swamp. Impossible showed up. And I think if there's anything that is the job of the leader, it's the job of someone in business who's doing sales. It's the job of the counselor. It's the job of everyone that has a mission and a purpose in their life. And that's to show other people what is possible. Not to tell them, but to show them. And that's what Yoda did in that moment. Didn't open his mouth. He just said, here, dude, watch this. And back full circle to Michael Jordan. That's why Michael Jordan is the greatest player of all time, because he didn't run his mouth. He showed you, you don't think I can fly? Watch me. And he didn't trash talk. Watch me. And I think as leaders, we need to help people discover possibility and believe in themselves, because I think belief is the greatest gift that you can give to anybody else. Is all of us are here today because at some point someone said, dude, did you know you could do that? And that moment was that belief that gave us, or maybe in your case, there's a slight disbelief that somebody gave you that you're not a good communicator, or that you shouldn't do that. So pack those things up and send them off to Goodwill, and find people who will believe in you, believe with you. And the only thing I can't do is believe for you. I can believe in you, I can believe with you, but I can believe for you. You've got to believe, dude. You
That's
have
right.
to step into your purpose and your thing that you were designed to do. And you might even be wrong in the very beginning that it's possible, but eventually, and man, history has shown us, from Abraham Lincoln to um, Colonel Sanders to Oprah, success later in life. And, you know, most of us, when we think we're entering you know, the third and fourth quarter, we're really just getting started.
That's right. There's a reason it's taken the time that it's taken. So
Yeah.
I'm definitely
And it's
running with it.
preparing you.
Yeah.
And it's, you just need the audacity of belief, man.
Yeah. Well, I I really appreciate this time with you, Terry. It's been super inspiring and encouraging, and I hope Nashville goes well
Yeah.
in the next couple of weeks, and I hope I can make it out to Orlando or Nashville sometime.
Yeah. Dude, Orlando coming up. The Thing, go to thingorlando.com. Get you there. In fact, I've got this great thing that we've just created, and there's a course coming very, very soon. But if you go to discoveryourthing.com, it's a great quiz that takes you through. It's 10 questions to kind of figure out where you're at on your journey as a leader and an entrepreneur. And then we're gonna have, where there's a course that we're literally kind of putting the finishing touches up, and we're gonna launch it here in a couple of weeks. That'll take you through the process of, really figuring out what might be next for you, and where your gifts really are, and how to really hone those, and to really, because that's what the thing is, right? Everyone has a thing, and we just want to help you do it better, whatever that is.
Nice. We'll put the links in the show notes on YouTube and on Spotify, and so definitely for those you watching and listening, check it out. Um, Thank you again, Terry. Any last thoughts before we
Man,
wrap things up?
it was great to be here today. And people can find me on my website, which is terryweaver.com. I'd love for you to sign up for my newsletter, which I don't send very often, but I do keep people up to date on when the next event's coming, and when we're kind of creating content, and when opportunities avail. And um, you know, I don't like. I'm not one of those people that spams your inbox 7 times in a week. Um, I've taken the courses that all say you're supposed to, and I'm just like, man, that's not who I am. I hate getting emails. I don't want to send very much of it. But
Appreciate
yeah,
that.
man, I think
Yes.
I appreciate the time to kind of hang out with you, and to speak to your audience about what they do. And man, you know I don't know if we covered anything. I don't know if we covered anything that had to do with courage or coaching today, but I can tell you the bravest thing you can do as a leader is believe in yourself, and believe that you're here with a purpose, and you have a mission. You've been designed to do something special, and the sooner you can get to work on that, the better you're going to be, and the better the world's going to be for it.
Oh, yes. Well, I definitely feel coached up, Terry, and absolutely belief is the heart of courage. So thank you so much.
And thank you.